Hello and welcome. Have you ever wondered what drives Keir Starmer? Why he makes the decisions that he makes? If so, you're not alone. That makes at least two of us. I suspect there are more people than that involved in trying to answer those questions, being puzzled by his behaviours. If you are one of those people who are puzzled by Keir, wonder why he does what he does in the way that he does it, then you may find this video really interesting, because what I'm going to do today is to look at a psychological profile of Keir Starmer's leadership. It's not my profile, not a profile that I have constructed, but instead someone else's, someone who's thought of in high regard. And whilst I don't believe all of it, I'm not sold on every single part of this profile because there are some weaknesses to the way these things have to be constructed. I believe that, generally speaking, the broad brushstrokes give us an accurate picture of who this individual is, at least in terms of leadership and some things that are driving his decision making. So to begin then, let us go here to this article. And I'll put a link to the article in the description. This is not the core report. It's an article which describes this psychological profile. For the sake of brevity, also for the sake of brevity, you'll see here, it says, Keir Starmer's psychological profile, why it's different from other prime ministers. You can say that again. And what it means for his dealings with Donald Trump. Yes, I'm not going to focus particularly on Donald Trump here, because it would make this video too convoluted, too long, and it would miss out. Potentially, I would muddy the messages that I believe are important to pay attention to from this profile in terms of Keir Starmer. So, beginning here. Traditional international relations theories often treat states as rational actors with little attention paid to who is making the decisions. In this view, leaders are interchangeable. Internal traits are black-boxed and considered irrelevant. In other words, people who pitch up to talk on behalf of a government or a large institution even, doesn't matter who they are, they're just grey people in grey attire. And the particular personalities, well, they're smoothed out and over by the state itself because they're simply an extension of the state. But political psychology challenges this. And you've probably challenged that as well, because it's so obvious that, particularly in recent years, that leaders can be quite markedly different, and those differences can be, well, good for us and bad for us. Leaders are not all the same. How they perceive and respond to constraints, be they economic, institutional or geopolitical, varies dramatically. Yes, indeed. Faced with similar conditions, different leaders make different choices. The decisions are shaped by traits, personality traits, motivations, absolutely, emotions, oh yes, and deeply held beliefs, whatever they may or may not be. Starmer, psychologically different to other PMs. Yes, he does appear to be. Political psychology offers tools for assessing leaders by analysing their public statements. Since traditional psychological assessments are rarely feasible, researchers rely on at-a-distance methods based on the premise that the way leaders speak and the language they use can reveal underlying traits, motivations and beliefs. Now, I think that's true, but it is also worth bearing in mind there is a weakness here because it is not a profile done in a traditional sense. It's at a distance. It's sort of diagnosis at a distance. However, is there validity in what they're doing? Is there benefit in understanding what these profiles can tell us? As far as I'm concerned, absolutely, 100%. One of the most widely used approaches is leadership trait analysis, developed by psychologist Margaret Herman. It employs computational content analysis, and we get an idea what that is here, to systematically code language and produce comparable personality profiles. This is important and a good thing to include. or in this case to exclude. To reduce the influence of speechwriters, the analysis focuses on spontaneous material, such as interviews and press conferences. The framework identifies 7 core traits that are particularly relevant to foreign policy decision-making. So again, we've got something which is skewed towards foreign policy. But if you think about Keir Starmer, that is something that he seems to be keenly interested in. Perhaps not as interested in some things in the country that we would like him to be interested in. However, for our purposes here today, I think it's fair to say that a profile which is relevant to foreign policy is then not going to be too far off the mark if it is accurate in terms of Keir. One of the 7 core traits measured by the framework, of the 7 core traits measured by the framework, Starmer scores within the typical range. Oh, he's in a typical range. That's a relief, genuinely. On task orientation, in-group bias, self-confidence, and conceptual complexity. But, so, again, without going into all that, and doing a deeper dive in terms of what may be going on or not, and potentially disagreeing with some of that stuff, I want to focus here. But he stands out in 3 areas. Distrust, let that sink in. Belief in his ability to control events. Now, do you think that it means he stands out because he doesn't believe he can control events? Or he has a high belief he can control events? A need for power. Never. I don't believe any of that for a second. In these, he scores significantly above average. Well. Distrustful leaders often view others as potential threats. Let that sink in. They view others as potential threats. People within his own party, perhaps. Not naming any names. Could it be that the others are people in the population? Could it be? Could it be that the others are, well, highly likely to be leaders of another party? No doubt. But distrust and fall back on control rather than collaboration. We're not in this together. I don't trust. Now, by the way, I only saw this profile or this article about the profile relatively recently, and I've talked in the past about this lack of trust that seems to come from this government, and in particular, Keir Starmer, to the population, and therefore from the population to the government. And here it is here. It's a hallmark of hawkish leadership and has been associated with costly policy errors such as George W. Bush's misjudgment on Iraq's weapons capabilities. What does this suggest about Starmer's potential relationship with Trump? Well, research on leader-to-leader dynamics is still developing. Now, let me pause there. So it's one of the other reasons I'm not going to get into this, because we get into far more an area of conjecture when we not only look at leadership traits from afar, who this leader may be, what is driving them, based on statements that aren't speech-written statements. So that adds a bit of distance. But then when we look at attempting to analyse, more than one individual at a distance and figure out what the dynamic is through the lenses of, photography, even the way that photographs are framed, etc., and the fact that many things are staged, I think that gets harder and probably, at the moment at least, less accurate. So Trump's leadership profile is well established. He scores high, this is Trump, in self-confidence, no surprise, low in task orientation, strong emphasis on loyalty, high levels of distrust. Again, his self-confidence means he rarely seeks disconfirming information, often filtering reality to fit his beliefs. And that's certainly what a lot of his critics would say, but if that's true, he's not alone. He's absolutely not alone. His low task focus reflects a preference for group loyalty. Yep, loyalty is important to Trump, but again, he's not alone. Over detailed policy, combined with a deep suspicion of others, this results in a transactional. So certainly Donald Trump's transactional, uncompromising leadership style, centered on personal allegiance. And you can see, I think you can see that with Trump. Is that part, personal allegiance, necessarily bad in of itself? No. But what then about Starmer? So in terms of Trump v. Starmer, and again, the reason for mentioning Trump and not getting too much into the dynamic is to then be able to focus back on Keir Starmer and consider what we can learn about him when we look at him in terms of this article, at least in relation to his dealing with Donald Trump. So presents challenges whose Starmer's high distrust and tendency to defy constraints, bullish, I'll do what I want, and complicate efforts to build mutual understanding. Yes, indeed. Yet his adaptability, pragmatism and balanced focus on people and tasks, combined with confidence in his ability to shape outcomes, may help him navigate this volatile relationship. Well, again, the authors have got to be polite, and they also don't want to in any way put any reflection onto the individual who created this profile to imply that somehow this was saying this. So the language is overall, let's say, upbeat and a little bit kid glove. But let me not exactly take the gloves off, but give you my translation of this. So his adaptability, I call it expediency, because he will adapt. He will befriend and then unfriend. He will follow a cause and then not be interested in that cause. He will flip-flop around. He will change. He will U-turn. That's another version of adaptability, and I think it's more accurate when describing Keir Starmer. So he'll just turn like that. Pragmatism. Now, for me, that says beliefs. I have a belief that I should be in power. I have a belief that I'm special. I have a belief that I know how to fix things, and I have a belief that I don't necessarily have to listen to anyone else. So I'll just go and get on with things. I have a belief that I want power, and I want to look good, and I want this deal for the country, partly because as I sit with Donald Trump, it's again, this is a little while back now, but it's going really badly in the UK. Well, okay, it still is going quite badly in the UK. But you can see how pragmatic he would be. So forget about that value, that belief. In the moment, I'm adaptable. How do I get this deal? How do I work with Donald Trump? And of course, you cozy up to him. And that's not difficult for Keir, because he also seeks more and more power. And he perceives Donald Trump as someone who, of course, given the role and the power of that nation, is someone with a huge amount more power and influence on the planet. So it's not difficult for him. But even if it was, because he wants what he wants, he'd do it. He did it. Combined with confidence in his ability to shape outcomes. And again, that could be also called pig-headed and blinkered and not listening. Overconfident. May help him navigate. So Starmer's leadership may lack the charisma or flair of his predecessors. Siri, define lack of charisma and flair. Keir Starmer. No, I'm just making that up. That wasn't Siri. I don't use it. Isn't switched on. And I'm being facetious. Yes, it certainly does. But his personality profile reveals a distinct and consequential approach to power. Confident, he certainly is. Overconfident, bullish, pig-headed, not listening, blinkered. Strategic, I will do what it takes in the moment. And my best friend today might not be my best friend tomorrow. Corbyn. Sorry about that. And distrustful. Well, yes, of almost everyone, it would seem. He's not a passive figurehead, no, but a leader likely to assert control. Yes, indeed, this is him. Challenge limits. Why can't we do that? Why can't we screw the country up more quickly? I don't believe it should take the next 4 years. Let's do it now. Oh, we're ahead of target? He certainly challenges limits and the limits of our patience and drive his vision. His vision. Isn't that interesting? No, I'm not saying that this is there deliberately. It could just be a sentence that's used to deliver this individual's vision. But I think with Keir, this is an interesting way to describe it. To drive his vision, what he wants, not to be challenged, knows what's best for us, will control, is confident in his own ability to get the outcome that he wants for us to be shaped in his image.